Thank you so much, Guido, for making the time. It's going to be so much fun sharing your story. I've already heard some tidbits of the story, and you guys are going to love getting to know Guido. So, Guido, please tell us where you were born and raised.
Well, I'm sure you all detected a slight accent, so you can place my country of birth very clearly. So yes, I was born and raised in Italy, where I stayed the first almost 50 years of my life. Then I moved to the States in the year 2000. And my professional and entrepreneurial career is divided in two separate parts, one in Italy and one in the US, but always in the same industry, which is eyewear. And eyewear is a very interesting industry. There's a technical component and there's a fashion component. And obviously the most attractive and is the design one, the fashion one. So we're going to talk about that extensively. So again, I studied in Italy. I have an MBA, the equivalent of an MBA in Italy, and then after.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're sort of skipping over what we all want to know. What was it like growing up in Italy, and where in Italy were you?
So I grew up in northern Italy, Torino. Torino is, well, besides the fact that it is where the Olympic took place immediately after Salt Lake City, it's also the capital of the car industry. So it's, but don't think of a Detroit in Italy. It's not like that. It used to be the capital of Italy when Italy was a kingdom. It's a city that has been founded by the Romans 2,000 years ago. It's all square. And there's a lot of history. So, see, for many of us in Italy, the taste, the architecture, the fashion is something you grow up with. Because I grew up in a building that was built in 1750, 1760. So there was a lot of history, a lot of architecture. That's the way you grow up, and that's what I believe facilitates Italians, as French and other European countries, facilitate their approach to fashion and design because of the environment in which we grow. So, well, I can talk about Italy for days if you don't stop me. So I'm trying to make it short, and I don't know who among you knows Italy, which is different than I've been there 3 days, because that's a mistake I notice in Italians when they come to the U.S. Oh, I know the U.S. I've been 3 days in New York. That's not knowing what the U.S. are. And so the reverse is, the first generalization is you Europeans. We Europeans means people from Finland and people from Sicily, people from Portugal and people from Bulgaria. We're all Europeans. There's a lot of difference due to the history. So Italy, which is a very small country, has a lot of differences between a region and another due to the history, due to the dominations that Italy had along the centuries. So the northwest, where I grew up, it's more influenced by the French culture, whereas northeast is more influenced by the German Saxon culture. The south is more influenced by the Arabic and Mediterranean culture. So you have a country that is 800 miles long, and you have enormous differences. So the north is the most industrialized and the hardworking, and the culture of work is there. And I grew up in a family where I'm the only child, but the concept of work and, most important, ethics of work were extremely important. So my father taught me that you have to work hard, you have to work smart, but you also have to work hard and be fair with those who are below you, fair with those who are at your side, and fair with those who are over you. be fair, and your fairness will always be recognized. And those are the value I grew up with. After college and then after a few work experiences, I became first CFO and then CEO of the company that manufactured the Persol sunglasses.
Bridget's modeling.
Bridget is modeling for us today. So as I was saying, the eyewear industry is a nice, has two components, the technical one, and it's the less interesting. So let's forget that and let's leave it to those who have to put the eyewear together. Then there's the design component. And I was having a brief conversation with Bassam before I had the honor of sitting here. I became CEO in the year 1986, 1985. That was the 80s. Most of you have no idea of what the 80s were. So let me spend a few words about that. The 80s were an era of excess. I'm not saying it was good, I'm not saying it was bad. I was saying it was an era of extreme creativity on both sides of the pond. America had the Reaganomics. I'm not expressing any political or social opinion here. I'm just saying the incentive to creativity in all fields was very high. The Wall Street yuppies with their suspenders, with the good and the bad. The raiders, bad, but the ones who facilitated the creation of business and the growth of business, the good. In Europe, and in particular in my industry, Italy was at the top of the world. The designers, the fashion designers in Italy, the Valentino, Armani, Prada, Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, you name them, they just obliterated the French ones, with the exception of Chanel. The French one disappeared. Germany, never been very good. Never been good. Let me open a bracket. There was a T-shirt that was very popular years ago, many years ago. And on the front said, "Heaven is where French are cook, German are car manufacturers, or mechanics, Italians are lovers, and everything is organized by the Swiss." Then on the back is hell is where French are mechanics, German are chefs, Swiss are lovers, and everything is organized by the Italians. So yeah, organization has never been our our strong point. Yes, but the German are bad designers. So again, Italy was at the top of the world. There were a few Japanese stylists, you know, the minimalist taste that never got too popular. And America was behind, I would say, with the exception of Ralph Lauren. There wasn't a real American designer. It was just catching up.
And Guido, do you mean that across industries, or do you mean just in fashion? Like automotive?
Well, I'm meaning it mainly in fashion, but there are the other industry. You were mentioning car manufacturing. Well, car manufacturing had different ways. I would say in that era, Italians were good at creation. Once again, not good at manufacturing. Fiat, it's fix it again, Tony, right? So yeah, problems. But designing, there's nothing like a Ferrari or a Maserati or something like that. The Americans, on the other hand, were going down. The Mustangs, the Corvette, the Cobra of the 50s and 60s were no longer there. And from a designer point of view, I'm saying, the American car industry was going down
by the 80s.
By the 80s. So to be responsible of a company that basically was operating in the fashion industry, if you want, in the 80s were extremely stimulating, because with all the excesses and with all the wrong, creativity was there in any single activity of the day with the stupid excesses and everything, but it was extremely stimulating. And with the 90s, and then with the 2000 technology overcame all the rest, and the world changed, but I wasn't there anymore. So so in 85 I became CEO. Then and Persol was a private business in the hand of a family mostly. So in the year 90, the ownership decided that they wanted to sell the company. And obviously, as a CEO, I was in charge of finding the buyer. And I clearly remember when the chairman of the board and owner took me for lunch in a nice restaurant, and on a napkin said, "So this is the price that I want for the shares, and a few other conditions." Very informal. And so I went home and I said, okay, now we got to hire an advisor, and let me make a few phone calls. Let's see. And then I developed the idea that I could engineer a leverage buyout and actually be the buyer of the company. For those who are not familiar with the terms, leverage buyout is substantially a financial structure in where you charge part of the debt to acquire the company, you charge it to the company itself. There have been a few very successful operations, Kraft in the 90s and some others, a lot of unsuccessful operations, because of course you start with a heavy burden of indebtedness in the company, and you have to absorb that. But I was familiar with the company. I knew where there were areas of savings. I knew where there were areas of expansion. So the indebtedness wasn't a worry. But it was a complex operation that needed to be engineered. And I did it with the help of friends and a couple of friends who were also manager of the company. So if you allow me to go one step backwards, when I became CEO and I realized that there were actions there were things that we needed to do, especially on the marketing point of view, become more aggressive, at the same time keeping the values that belong to the company, such as quality. You were saying, I had them for 8 years and they're still there. You're going to have them for 25 years if you want. I encourage you to change them because of fashion reasons, but if you want, my wife has an extensive collection, of course, of old frames. She's still wearing frames of 30, 35 years ago. So quality has always been a pillar of Persol, and my task was to keep the quality, but at the same time to modernize marketing and design. Another bracket, quality. In the 80s is where the Japanese were very much ahead in production techniques. And if someone of you has ever had to do with production flow, and they invented systems that would minimize inventories of work in process. That was the Japanese in the late 70s, early 80s. Among the other things, they invented the concept that is called total quality. So if quality is one of the things you base your business on, and I don't know exactly how this is comparable with your business, but I think that at the end, the basic concepts are the same, no matter if it's fashion or technology. So if one of the pillars of your business is quality, then it has to be total quality. Everything you do must be of quality. You cannot fall on a little thing that is not total quality. Give you an example. We, as anybody else, were printing T-shirts as a gift for a promotional material. Our T-shirts were not the 99 cents shitty, T-shirt, were Egyptian cotton, $10 each, wonderful T-shirts that my clients of back then still wear nowadays. So everything, because when you touch it and you feel that this is quality that gets along with the final product, which is the frame. Okay, sorry. I'm still 25 years later, so passionate about that part of my life that I tend to be a little too much. So please interrupt me. Okay, say enough. So quality. So the task was keep the quality, but modernize the marketing, modernize advertising, modernize the style and the design. And you know, it's easy to say that sometimes it's not that easy to do. So my first effort was create a first line of management, of people who can work with you, give you stimulus, give you ideas, give you, I never wanted yes men. I always wanted someone who said, sorry, in a polite way, but sorry, I disagree. Don't do that, why don't you do this? And by creating that first line, and everybody with the same goal and the same expectations, and then but with contrasting backgrounds and ideas, I believe we were able to do the leverage buyout and progress well, achieving not all, but 90% of our goals, to the point that 6 years later we were approached by a big conglomerate in the eyewear business, which is this Luxottica that owns pretty much every single company, including Ray-Ban, Oakley, everything you think is American, belongs to the Italian Luxottica. So we were approached and we were offered a reasonable offer, and we decided to sell the company that had reached a good level of development. But if you ask me what allowed us, among difficulties, but what allowed us to do what we had to do in 10 years, I would say the people. Having that first line of managers who would share the goals, even though everybody has his own different angle, so that there were discussions and there were difficult moments, of course. You design an idea and then you have to adjust every day, because not everything that you dream of can really happen. And in the difficult times, that a consolidated organization works. Through that, we were also able to change one mistake that was in the corporate mentality before. When I took responsibility of Persol, the company was very much top to bottom oriented. The top would take decision, the bottom would execute. In 10 years, I think we succeeded in obtaining at least 51%, reversing that and making it bottom to top. Even we had 250 workers in the factory, and they were encouraged to give recommendation and suggestion to their chief, their responsible of that particular production process, how to improve it. It seems probably today is more frequent, but back then it wasn't, and it was a barrier. The unions, Italy is very, very heavily unionized, and the unions were not in favor of this. They didn't want a bottom to top process. They still wanted to have a strong grip on the workers, so they didn't like it. So they ostracized the process and the idea. But we made it.
Since you're focused on the people, let's continue there for just a minute, Guido.
Sure.
What did you transition the team when you took over, and what criteria did you use to select those that you pushed down or out, and versus those that you pulled up and in?
Interesting question, because this is the difference between thinking one thing and then executing.
Yeah.
Because I can think that, oh yeah, I need a strong team. Yeah, then how do I do it? The average age in the company was high, because, and now this seems ridiculous now that I'm 71 and it was old. But
those 35-years were so old.
Yeah. So basically, with the exception of one manager, I'm talking about a group of 7 people. That's what I needed to manage. Maybe add another 3, 10 people. A couple of them were young, receptive, and they were perfect for their job description. The rest needed to be either promoted or hired from the outside. The replacement of someone who has been there for 25 years is not easy. But if there's one sentence that I never accepted in my professional life is, oh, we're doing this because we always did like that. If I hear that sentence, that person is out of my organization. If the world continues going like this because we always did like that, then we're not going anywhere. Let me open another bracket. I had frequent contact with Japan in my professional life, and there are things that I admire deeply in their culture, and others that I dislike. And one that I dislike is, after knowing their kind of organization a little bit, the Japanese typical corporation or social structure is such that nobody wants to be innovative. Everybody in a flow chart in a typical Japanese corporation, they tend to do what they have always done, in the most perfect way, but don't go outside because you're criticized, and that's why innovation in Japan takes so much time. Once they do it, it's perfect, but it takes a lot of time because nobody wants to go a different way, and that's a big mistake, in my humble opinion. So, if someone said, "Oh, I'm doing this because we always did like this," then you don't belong here, because that's not the way you innovate and you move. So yes, the replacement was not immediate, and obviously you have to be, grateful to those who have done their job. It's just that they don't see a different way, and so it took years. It's not something you do overnight, but I think I achieved it at least 80-90%.
Guido, I hope I can ask this question as constructively as I mean it, but you have an interesting chapter where you had, at one point you were a hired CEO, and then after something switched, you became the owner CEO. And you mentioned the transition of the team and the expectations on the team after the transition. And I hope you hear my respect for this still. I obviously respect how difficult that transition would be, but why does it happen when you're the owner and not when you're the hired gun?
Your question required a complex answer. First of all, I believe the way people perceives you when you are a hired CEO is much different than when you become the owner. CEO is Chief Executive Officer. You are an executive. You are the top executive, but you are an executive. You still have to click your heels in front of the ownership. And everybody who's working with you, as much as they appreciate you, they understand that you're not the final decision maker. Does this make sense?
Absolutely.
Then you switch, and your position becomes completely different. Here the problem becomes authority is not something you can exercise. You can just tell, oh, from tomorrow I'm no longer the CEO, I'm the chairman. Now you're going to click your heels in front of me. That's not how it works. You have to conquer that. And to conquer that, I personally did it by example. I mean, working 15 hours a day, and Saturday being in the office working alone because you can put your idea together, and on a Sunday travel so that I could be in Japan or in the US Monday morning at 7. An example is it's still a good thing. And then sharing but the way your people perceives you is very different, very different.
I really appreciate that answer. So I'm glad you disabused me of lumping Europe together, let alone, well, Italy together, let alone Europe together. So I won't ask the question as to Europe versus the US culturally, because since 2000 you've been here in the business world and you built and sold another business here in the US. What I'd love to hear from you is, given your whatever preconceived expectations you had of the US, what surprised you as counter? How was the US different than you thought it would be?
Yes. So just to complete the second phase of my professional life was in the United States, where I, together with a partner, I started a retail business, still eyewear. So we opened a store, and then we got to 15 stores in Florida, high end, super high end, and then 2 years ago we sold it, and now I'm done.
Just 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
So very recently. Wow.
Yeah, very recent. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So same industry, obviously two different sides of the desk. One was the manufacturing, and the other one was retail. And I love retail. The differences between Europe and the United States. So again, let's understand that Europe is not as unified as we think, even if there's a euro. But by the way, in my humble opinion, there are big differences among the states of the United States too. I live in Miami. I spent a few days in Seattle. Between Miami and Seattle, besides the fact that we use dollars, not even the language, because in Miami, number one language is Spanish, is not English, okay? So forget the language, it's not the same. And the dollars, yes, is the same, but the culture, there's nothing in common. So a philosopher used to say, in every generalization, there's a big margin of error. So we all tend to generalize, and we got to be careful with that. So, but yes, of course, there's common ground, and there's a common ideas. The biggest impact on business, in my opinion, is Europe has a much higher level of bureaucratization, and the environment is not too conducive of the development of small business in Europe. Whereas in the United States, the environment facilitates the founding and the growth of small business on many plans. The bureaucratic ones, I don't know. In the States, you want to create a company, an LLC. You call your lawyer, and the lawyer says, yes, the company has been funded, go. In Europe, it requires 90 days, the approval of the tribunal, the approval of this, the approval of that, the approval of that. By the time you operate with your ideas, it's already 4 months, and someone else might have done the same. So bureaucracy, and also a mentality where you guys grew up in an environment where being an entrepreneur is highly evaluated. Running your own business is highly evaluated. Being a member of a small business is highly evaluated. Then you have the big corporation. That's not not so positive. But the individuality is highly promoted. Whereas in Europe, got to be careful not to go into politics. But in Europe, it's mainly, okay, let me get hired by a big company, and then I have my desk, and I will stay there, and 8 hours, and I'm done. It's the culture is far less in favor of, let me build a business. I don't know. When I came to Miami in the year 2000, I remember a plumber who went to my house to fix a little plumbing problem. I met this guy 10 years later, and he was a plumber with his old small pickup and full of stuff. I met him 10 years later. He had 6 or 7 pickups with 20 employees, 24-hour service, and he had a good size small business.
Yeah.
This is very, very difficult to create in Europe. The environment is not conducive. It's more, okay, let's have a safe place, safe workplace, and that will remain the same for the next 30 years. That's the biggest difference. That's a big difference, as you realize.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Guido. I'm going to turn it to the team. I turn it over to the team for questions. So, Kimber?
Because I want to build on your last comment there, which is with the cultural difference, what gave you the idea to, and the energy and the vision to actually go and build companies and do this, where in a culture that wasn't really conducive to it? What gave you that spark?
Sure. I don't want to brag or look like I'm, but yes, I was different. I since my year in high school and a conversation with my father, who never aligned to this idea, I realized that would have not been my life. Just the search of something quiet was not for me. And again, when I did the leverage buyout, the risk was elevated, because again, you put a lot of indebtedness on a company. It might go well, it might go wrong. But since I was in high school, I rejected the idea of being aligned, and so I graduated from high school in 1969. 1969, different era, was when the student revolution took place on both sides of the ponds. First started in '68 in France, and then America, California, Berkeley, and again with a lot of excesses, but it brought something good. And in Italy, so was my last high school year. High school in Europe is 5 years, not 4. So my last year of high school, and because of the movement and the protest of the students, they were picketing the entrance of the school, prohibiting the other students to enter. Again, I'm not making any political statement here. I'm just saying, for me, if someone tells me you're not going to go to school, I'm going to go to school. It's not it's not the principle. The ideas of the movement were substantially correct, but the idea that someone imposes me what I have to do, that is not acceptable for me. And so, and I would go home with my shirt torn apart because I want to go to school, not because I love school, and not because I don't think that you are right, but you're not going to tell me if I must go or if I stay out of school. Does this make sense? These things are less popular today, even though there are instances like that. So I realized that it was different for me, and I would never accept the prepackaged tranquil life, and I continued. When I moved to the States with all my family, I had 2 daughters. I didn't have a business. I didn't have a job. I had the little money that I'd made with the sale of the company. I'm not saying that we crossed the ocean on a rowboat. I'm not saying this, but I didn't have a job or a business. But I said I believe this is the right move, and I'll do it. And then something I'll engineer something. And I think even the second business was not bad. I mean, I'm not at Zuckerberg for sure, but from 1 store to 15, it's still a good in the high end, which is not something you can go cookie cutter with 1,000 store. You gotta each one has to be
Boutique.
boutique. So,
Yeah.
so with difficulties, yes, with difficulties, because every time I hear someone who, oh no, I've always been successful. Think of the stock exchange. When you hear someone that, me, never lost $1 at the stock exchange, always made money. And I say, oh yeah, yes, of course. So of course, you know, there's the ups and downs there, but if you feel for what you're doing, you do it. Period.
Heather. Oh,
Well,
sorry,
the
Brian.
first thing you said, since Kimber went to the last, the first thing you said about work has resonated with me. I went to Europe for a summer. I had a plan, like I want to drive fast cars, go on the Autobahn, I want to go to Italy, I want to do all these things. And I was only supposed to be in Italy a week, and I stayed a whole month because I wanted to, and just the art and the culture and then the different parts of Italy. And,
Absolutely.
but what changed my life, I went to Trieste. I went to some wineries too, and seeing people who their work was so noble and honorable, like it didn't matter what they did, it mattered to them, it mattered to their families. So I felt like I walked away like all work is noble. I think in the US we have a little bit like, well, she's a house cleaner, and people put these levels on what people do. And at my age, it was really eye-opening from a girl who's never been anywhere to like say, all work is noble. And from that day on, I treated all people differently, people I worked with, people who worked for me differently. How do you, and I hear that in you, how did you bring that to America and to your high-end retail? Or did you bring that with you, and do you see those differences being here?
So I definitely concur that every job can be noble if it's done in an ethical way. So the CFO or the mailman have their role, and the role must be respected. See, I never had an experience of working for a big corporation in America, where probably what you're saying is at its worst, right? Where you judge people from depending on the level where they are, but I've never worked for a big corporation, which might be a limit. If I would go back, I would probably have accepted a 5-year gig in a big corporation, because you have things to learn. In a small business, I've always been in a small business environment. It's not difficult to respect everybody, and you know, and I mean, the atmosphere that I see here it's great. I mean, you guys have this time to do something that is not strictly operational. It seems to me that you're interacting very well here and there, and so it's not difficult to practice it. It always comes from the top. So if the top wants to create that atmosphere, and then everybody understands it, and then they'll do it, and then they will return to the top with great ideas. It's that simple. Did I somehow reply to your question?
In a very political.
I must be political.
No, you are. No, I think it definitely resonates. I mean, it comes from Bassam, what he's building here. It definitely comes here, and then, you know, he's a great mentor and all of that, and so it's exactly what you said. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Heather. That's nice of you. Brian.
Given your success in the past, what's next? What are you doing now, and what's on the radar?
I'm enjoying my free time. I have rejected several offers of board here, board there, do this, do that. You're far, far, far away from that. But you'll get to a point in your life will the most treasure wealth is going to be own your time. There's a moment where money, I have what I need. Power, I've never researched power. Self-gratification, I think I've done what I wanted to do. I achieved it as humble and low level as it could have been. So I don't need any validation, but my time is very precious. I have grandchildren. I like sports. It's the most precious thing. So in my future, relax and enjoy my free time, traveling, my grandchildren, and no more business.
Talk about your taking to Paris.
Oh,
Peking to Paris.
okay.
Okay.
So I always liked car racing. When I was young and my father was paying, I raced in the World Rally Championship. I did this Monte Carlo Rally, things that you probably don't never heard about. But it was racing at a world level. And then I kept doing something. And a few years ago, I was offered the opportunity to participate to a car race that goes from Beijing, China to Paris. The history is in 1907, that was the dawn of the automobile era. A French magazine instituted a prize and said, we're going to give a certain amount of money and a trophy to those who will win a race, a car race from Beijing to Paris, 1907. I've seen all the pictures. They were, just to give you an example, when they had to cross a river, they would hire 30 people, disassemble the car, bring the car on the other side of the river, and reassemble the car. So it took those people 3.5 months to join Paris. And the winner was a nobleman Italian with the Itala, which was a big car back then. Okay, so in 1993 or 4, they restarted this race for you can do it only with antique car, vintage cars. And it's from Beijing to Paris. It's 36 days of race on a car that is an antique car that has been completely reassembled and modified, but it's still a 1941 car. Driving 8-10 hours a day, crossing Mongolia, which is 3,000 kilometers of rough dirt, really rough, crossing 9,000 kilometers of Russia, which is for 1/3 rough, another third super rough, and then finally, you get to the asphalt, and then Europe. But at that point, you're done. In Mongolia, we would drive 10 hours a day, then put our tent, because there's no hotels, no nothing. Put our tent. Once you're done with the tent, you go under your car and you start fixing and changing and replacing, and then you have 3-4 hours of sleep, and then you start again the following morning. All that for 36 days. With an environment, with a company that is wonderful, because you have people from all over the world. I've learned how the Kiwis and the Australian are a different breed. Different, because they would do the same driving, they would do the same fixing, and they would start drinking beers. And they would drink beer that I don't drink in a month. And then the following morning, boom, restart again. A different breed, a different breed. But then, and you socialize with the people from all over the world. There was a prince from Thailand, and everybody just want to get to Paris and celebrate once you're there. That was a wonderful experience with cars, but also with people. And by the way, I have to say, crossing Russia, I've met friends. We're still in contact with humble people who was passionate about cars. There was no politics involved, and we had wonderful conversation around the fire, the bonfire at night, and that's to say that there's nice people everywhere in the world. And unfortunately, they put us one against the other. But
So how did you do?
how?
How did you do in the race?
Well, we got to the end 26th out of 118, which is not bad. I tend to be competitive, so I would have won something more. Let's say the first 10, but we had a major mechanic breakdown that took us 12 hours to fix. So it was acceptable. It was being rookie. It was
It's
acceptable.
not bad, no, not at all.
A 1941 Chevrolet Coupe. If someone is passionate about this car, there was the car with Juan Manuel Fangio won the Carrera Panamericana in 1940. So it was completely remodified, and because otherwise you wouldn't do 100 miles. Forget 9,000. But still a very rough car.
I
But it
wish
was
I
fun.
could say Panamericana the way he just did. Doesn't that just sound beautiful? It's just,
Had cars in my head.
it's, yeah.
The last car movie.
Well, Guido, thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning and bringing your energy and wisdom. We really appreciate it.
I am sure. I'm sorry. I understand. I understand. When I start talking, I tend to extend it a little too much. It's only because I'm passionate
it was
about what
wonderful.
I've done. That's the only reason.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.